In this video, I wanted to show how we can connect open source and self-hosted LLMs to our data, which is stored in ClickHouse. This is a very relevant topic right now. A lot of people are looking at how do you bring AI back into your own data center or your own accounts, rather than having a dependency on the big model providers. I'm going to touch on some of the reason why in just a moment. And at the same time, obviously, everyone's looking at how do you build agents and how do you connect them to your internal business data. So this is two big ideas which are intersecting right now. I've just got a couple of slides just to kind of set the scene, and then I'm going to jump into a demo of this in action and show how I have deployed it. So firstly, why are people looking to do this in the first place? Why are we looking to connect LLMs and models to our data, and in our case in ClickHouse? I broadly see three buckets of use cases. The first is what I call agentic analytics. So this is where people want to ask questions about their data in natural language. So this is kind of a replacement for dashboards and business intelligence. It's just I think it's a better way to work with data, more interactive. You can drill down into the directions that you need to go, etc. But basically a business intelligence type replacement. The second one is kind of more complex agentic workflows. So if you imagine like a back office process in finance or HR or logistics, people are developing agents, and some of those agents need to call into our databases to get data, get context, and make decisions. So I kind of differ from the two because, on the second one, there's not a human there prompting and asking questions interactively. It's happening in the background, fulfilling all kinds of business processes. The third bucket of use cases relate to observability. So as you may know, ClickHouse is really good for logs, metrics, traces, machine-generated data. And there's a lot of people are developing agents to kind of monitor that data, to identify situations and potentially resolve them. You might get this in kind of infrastructure logs, application logs, or in the security world where we're kind of looking to detect breaches. Because ClickHouse is really good at working with this type of data, and because everyone's developing agents, there's a lot of kind of interest and a lot of interesting projects being built at this intersection. So we're looking to connect LLMs to our ClickHouse data. What about this topic of moving away from centralized LLM providers by the big labs towards open source self-hosted models? So as I say, this seems very relevant right now, and it's becoming the case for three reasons. One is about return on investment and cost of AI. So as its use is expanding, a lot of companies are now trying to get a grip of the cost and asking tough questions about a return on investment. Obviously, what you can do, if you can adopt kind of smaller specialized open source models, that's a great route for taking cost out of your AI solutions, potentially up to 80% of the cost, based on my analysis. The second one is about kind of data sovereignty and privacy. And this is not only about kind of keeping your sensitive data in-house. If you're using kind of external LLM providers, you're also giving them information on your business processes, your workflows, and your intellectual property. So this is really driving renewed interest in open source self-hosted models. The ability to customize and fine-tune the models is something we can do easily with open source. So people are looking to tweak, build differentiating experiences in their AI, another big reason. The next is about like business continuity. So, obviously as we know, sometimes the models can become unavailable when they're overloaded. And we've also had an instance recently where models were revoked. This is kind of an unacceptable business continuity risk. So companies are looking at bringing things more in their control to guard against some of those risks. And finally, it's about kind of transparency and trust. So what we want is more visibility of what's going on in the model what weights have gone into it, how has it been trained, and we can't necessarily do that with a black box kind of model provided as a service. So, two big themes, as I say, they're intersecting. One is, how do I connect LLM to my business data? The second is this driver towards running AI on your own terms, in your own data center, using open source model without dependencies on third parties. So let's get into how we can build and make use of this stack in ClickHouse. The model is fairly simple. At the bottom of the solution, we have ClickHouse. As we know, this is great in a situation where I've got billions and billions of rows, and I would like to query that in complex and interesting ways, including very real-time, very fresh data. ClickHouse is brilliant for this use case, and it's why it is showing up in all kinds of AI products and projects, and really benefiting as AI is growing in use. Interacting with ClickHouse, we have a model, and for the purposes of this demo, I'm using the open source GLM model, which has had a lot of attention over the last month. People believe this is kind of just behind the frontier, but you know, as I say, potentially at 20% of the cost, and it's open weights and you can run it privately. Then what you want is some way of interacting with that model, and in this demo I'm going to show a kind of chat UI which has a agentic type interaction. So what I'm going to do is ask some questions in natural language. It's going to hit the model is going to kind of leave a model, execute some tools which go back into ClickHouse to pull relevant context and data, and then we're going to formulate a response and pass that back to the chat UI. So how has that been deployed? So if I change to my server here, this is just a standard virtual machine. It's a CPU based server, so it's not even a GPU based server. And what I found is if you're doing kind of text-based interactions, document summaries, agentic analytics, the performance is pretty good even with a CPU-based server. So this particular one has 32 gigabytes of RAM. I used a framework called llama.cpp. This is what actually hosts the LLM. There is an alternate framework called vLLM, which seems to have more mindshare and be a better, kind of more efficient proposition. But llama.cpp is easier to get started with, and I heard the performance is better on CPU-based architectures. I have a folder here called models, and this is a GLM model which I've downloaded. I think this is 4.9 billion parameters. The binary is 6 gigabyte, and I think their aim is to fit all of that into memory as well as the context. So when I started this, we have a large context and the 6 gigabyte binary. It's a 32 gigabyte machine, so seems adequate for this use case. So that is running. If I go over here, Llama CPP exposes a user interface which you can use to test with. So I'm connected to that virtual machine. It's a Hetzner virtual machine, and I've selected this GLM model. I'll give it just a quick test here. So tell me a story about cheese, and then the story is generated. You can see this is 20 tokens per second. I think that's actually quite slow compared to what you'd get from ChatGPT or something, but it's still probably fine for many use cases. And this is totally unoptimized, right? We've got one instance of the model, only a 32 gigabyte CPU based machine. So I'm sure we can dramatically improve performance given time. So we'll leave that running. What I'm then going to do, I'm going to use this user interface I've developed. So I've created my own framework for developing agents over ClickHouse. And this is one I created earlier. It's called Trade Surveillance Agent. I'm going to go in here, and you can see at the bottom, it's a little bit hard to read, but we're connected to the self-hosted GLM model, which is the one I've just set up. This agent is also configured to point to a ClickHouse database, and if I look at that schema, it's about trades. So I've got some trades, some orders, some surveillance alerts, and some watch lists. And if I look at some sample data from within this ClickHouse instance, trades, orders, alerts, and watch lists. Now, what I could start by doing is just ask some questions like, what tables do you have in the data set? And what this is going to do, it's going to go to a GLM model, it's going to assess the question, and then it's going to execute tools to interrogate ClickHouse and pull back a list of tables which are available to the agent. And we can see here it's identified that we've got trades, orders, surveillance alerts, and watch lists. So at this point we've got a totally open source self-hosted stack. I'm running this front end agent. We have GLM model is hosted on my Hetzner server, and it's fronted by an OpenAI API. And I'm also running open source ClickHouse. So there are no dependencies on any AI vendors here whatsoever. Front to back, open source, self-hosted, all in our control. I'll just briefly ask a couple more complex questions. So are there any traders who are on the watch list and also have open alerts? Now to answer that, we're going to have to look at this watch list table and the surveillance alerts. So slightly more complex queries. These are the kind of thinking, reasoning tags. I don't think I'm rendering correctly here, but the LLM is basically deciding a plan of action to execute the query. And we can see it's then gone and issued this query against ClickHouse. It's done a join between surveillance alerts and watch list and pulled back a list of trader IDs. So this is an example of, it's kind of like agentic analytics. I'm asking a plain natural language English question. The model is deriving the SQL and it's executing that against a database. So the purpose of all of this is just to demonstrate how we can build these open source based AI solutions. It's fully on our own infrastructure. All of the data remains private. All of these interactions remain private. Nothing is logged, nothing is used for training. None of our intellectual property has been leaked. So yeah, hopefully that was useful. I've had a number of demos of connecting to, the big labs. So I have Anthropic-based demos. I've been using the kind of neo clouds and the inference services, such as Base 10, and Fireworks AI. They're becoming my kind of go-to. They're very fast, very resilient, good price performance trade-off. And then I'm also building kind of sovereign self-hosted solutions like this. If you would like to have a chat about AI against ClickHouse, then please do reach out. I'm an independent consultant focusing full-time on ClickHouse-based solutions. This is my website, benjaminwootton.com, so have a read about the type of things I get involved in, and you can get in touch via the form here. So yeah, thanks very much.